Chapter 16. The cargo bay, pressurized and cold, felt like a tomb. Without the 3 vehicles they brought on the mission, the long wide bay seemed too empty. If not for the shelves of secured crates, Dunn would have thought S&R Black was back at Trident Station, rotting as it waited for a mission. Supply crates were a necessary evil. While the larder, medical bay, and personal supply stations were stuffed with extra provisions, emergency supplies stayed in the vacuum-packed Atmos steel boxes. The standard 3x3 meter crate had been around much longer than Dunn had been alive. Their design hadn't changed much in over a century. Spare ship parts and larger components often necessitated larger crates. Those were stowed below the cargo bay and raised from a grav lift. Extra suits, weapons, ammunition, life support components, and even hygiene products spent their lives in crates waiting for a reason to be opened. Each crate was opened upon return, checked for expiration, replenished, and then stacked back in Corinthus' warehouses until they were once again loaded aboard a ship destined for space. Red-labeled crates contained hazardous or explosive materials. Yellow-labeled crates, on the other hand, were filled with operational necessities. Green crates were for personnel. Those were the 3 primary colors, which is why he was confused by the 10 blue-labeled crates hidden at the back of the shelves. Using his block, he scanned the serial numbers and compared them to the loadout manifests Corinthus had provided, as well as the numbers Colonel Hayes had included in his message. They matched. "Classified," he said to the empty bay. He sent a block command to the supply shelves, and the shelf with the blue crates slid forward from the assembly. With grav plate assistance, the shelf raised until it was waist high. Dunn examined the crates as he attempted to discern any differences between them. There weren't any. The crates were identically labeled, identical in construction, and looked as though they'd never been used. Between the lifters, the packing, and all the other mechanical endeavors involved in a loadout, crates suffered pockmarks, scratches, and dents in their surface. You could always tell whether a crate had seen space before. These had obviously not. He chose one at random, third to the left side of the shelf, and sent a block command to it. The crate responded with a security key challenge. Dunn replied with his public key. The crate immediately opened with a hiss, the lid slowly rising until it stood at a 90-degree angle. Dunn blinked. 5 warheads stared back at him, the yellow hazard stickers on them glowing beneath the overheads. His block received a message from the crate. "Captain Dunn, these 10 crates have been loaded with experimental weapons and supplies designed for exosolar material and possible life forms. Instructions and descriptions of each piece of ordnance are available via your block upon opening the crates. We suggest you use your best judgment in arming your ship and your Marines. The trio wishes you the best of luck." Dunn parsed the message over and over again. "Exosolar life forms?" he said aloud, the words echoing in the largely empty cargo bay. What the hell was the trio talking about? "Black," he called out.
"Yes, Captain."
The voice was a purr. "What do you know about these crates?"
"Apart from their classified status and that they are aboard, I know nothing,"
Black said. "The trio gave you no instructions regarding them?"
"No, Captain.
Black said.
I am not privy to classified materials I have not been given specific access to. In the case of the crates, they were marked for your eyes only."
He tapped a finger on the side of the crate before peering closely at the 5 warheads. "Weapons? Why would they send weapons?"
"Is that a question to me?"
Black asked. He flicked his head up to the ceiling where he knew one of Black's hundreds of interior cameras sat. "No," he said, "but I'd appreciate some theories." Black paused.
"It is possible, although unlikely, that the trio knows what is aboard Mira, or they received information that led to the creation of weaponry designed for specific threats."
"Mira has been dead for 43 years, Dunn said. "We stopped getting signals from her nearly half a century ago."
"Correct,"
Black said. "So how could the trio have known what happened to Mira? And if they did, why don't we know it too?" The AI said nothing. Dunn returned his eyes to the crate. It sent another block message to him describing the warheads. He read it, the words replacing his fear and unease with confusion. Carbon, oxygen, explosive, he said to himself. The warheads in the crate were designed to fuse oxygen and carbon to create a cloud of stable CO2. In a vacuum, the gas would quickly lose cohesion and spread as individual molecules. What the hell good was this? Black, what would be the point of creating a cloud of CO2 in space?
Unknown,
The AI said. Dunn stopped himself before uttering a curse. Against ships, such a weapon would be completely useless. It seemed more of a scientific lark, and an extremely useless one at that, rather than something designed for warfare. The fusing of the two elements would surely create a hell of an energy wave, but not nearly as large as nuclear fusion or fission bombs. And considering the warhead's size, the cloud they created had to be relatively small. He opened the next crate and waited for the lid to spring up. That's when Noble called. He had difficulty focusing on the conversation with all the thoughts spinning in his mind. When he finally managed to concentrate, he realized what Noble was saying about the reactor, okayed the shutdown, and then started to worry about what would happen if Noble couldn't bring it back online. Another worry, another concern. Kalimura's squad was still missing. Dalby had found more of that gunk that killed Nero, Black was acting strange, and now the ship had a radiation leak that seemed more serious than they thought. What else was going to go wrong? The open crate waited for him. It had already sent him a block message of its contents. He was a little afraid to read it. Hyper-neutrino warhead, the block message read. The description made little sense to him, but involved creating highly unstable atoms whose theoretical life was less than a nanosecond in duration. Once the warhead detonated, it created a cloud of unstable matter that disappeared almost as quickly as it appeared. The warhead's efficacy was rated as lethal to humans in a direct blast, certain exomaterials, and safe for ships. In other words, this weapon was useless if you fired it at something encased in Atmos steel. Detonating it in atmosphere or near spacewalking humans will result in extreme lethality. Okay, he thought. You created something that can kill everyone in its area of effect but not damage the ship or hurt anyone inside. We could have used these in the satellite war. As soon as he had the thought, his mind filled with memories of dozens of SFMC personnel floating through space toward their objectives, protected only by their suits. The combatants had been doing the same. If someone had launched one of these things into their midst, everyone would have died in a nanosecond. He shivered. The third and fourth crates contained flechette magazines, 30 between the two of them. The two crates sent identical block messages, tritium flechettes. Each flechette round contained 3 thick shards of Atmos steel designed to explode on impact and spread heavy water on the target. The rounds were not to be used outside of a vacuum and only by personnel wearing radiation-proof suits. The unstable tritiated water was radioactive once released from the flechette round. Dunn didn't want to think about how much radiation the flechettes would leave in their wake. Probably contaminate a ship in a heartbeat. Black.
Yes, Captain.
Dunn swallowed hard before speaking. Do you know why the trio waited until now to tell me about the crates? Black didn't answer immediately. That worried Dunn. When AIs paused, it meant their processing power was being utilized on some other matter, such as running exhaustive simulated outcomes based on what they said or did.
The trio most likely didn't want to cloud your mind with unnecessary complications if they weren't necessary. Now that we have confirmed the existence of exosolar material aboard Mira, the trio felt it was time for you to know.
Dunn put his hands on his hips and glared at the ceiling. My Marines are out there without this gear.
That is correct, Captain.
So, he said, what good does it do us now?
I assume when the Marines are back aboard, you will arm them with the new weapons. But until then, only the warheads can be immediately loaded.
Too late for Kalimura, he muttered. Black didn't comment. Chapter 17. Shit Show. Those 2 words describe the situation perfectly. Dickerson glanced at his suit report as he mag-walked behind Carb. Despite the pain in his ribs and the damage to his suit, He had plenty of O2, water recyc still functioned, and, most importantly, he was still in one piece. But he didn't know how long any of that would last. Carb walked a meter ahead of him and to his left. She had the angle down the hallway in case anything came at them from that direction. His responsibility? The right. If something came down the middle, they'd both have a line of fire. Standard fire team formation. If they were in normal gravity, the two would be squatting and covering ground with slow, methodical steps. In ZG and using mag boots, the lack of speed wasn't by choice. They could both detach and float down the hall using their suit thrusters, but it wasn't worth the risk of running into another swarm of those pinecone things. "Did you get a good look at them?" Dickerson asked over the private comms.
Look at what? Be a little more specific.
Carb said. "The pine cones." Carb took a deep breath and exhaled it in a shuddering stream.
Better than I wanted.
She said.
What the fuck lives in a vacuum? I mean, what can it eat? How does it breathe?
"Hell if I know," Dickerson said. "Some of the exobiologists believe non-carbon-based life forms could survive a vacuum." She snorted.
What exobiologists are those? The ones working for the hollow industry?
Did we or did we not just get attacked by something that lives in a vacuum?" Carb was silent for a moment. When she finally replied, her voice had an annoyed edge to it.
We did.
She said.
But that doesn't mean they're not machines or something.
Machines. The pinecone things seemed as though they were made of metal, or something like metal. The outer shell certainly was similar, but when he'd flown through the cargo bay, his suit lights had caught an entire swarm off to the left. At the time, he'd been too distracted trying to keep out of their way to get a good look, but what he'd seen had shrunk his balls to pellets. Carb went silent, her helmet lights swinging from the wall to the area in front of her and back again. Every 2 meters or so, she repeated the pattern. Dickerson was doing the same, but not as methodically. He was too lost in thought about what those things were. His boot struck something, and he would have tripped if not for the other foot maglocked to the floor.
Damn it, Dickerson!
Carbonara yelled at him. He cast his suit lights down. A small box of rations tumbled through the air a few centimeters from the floor. "Didn't see it,"
That's because you're not watching where you're walking, asshole!
she said. "Yeah, right." He tried to shake away the thoughts of the monstrous-looking creatures, but his mind kept coming back to them. "Did you ever visit any of the arboretums on Earth?"
No.
She said.
And why the hell are you bringing that up right now?
He checked his HUD. "Because we have another 15 meters to clear before we reach the lift, and because I need to talk."
Okay, fine. No, I never did.
"What about the aquariums?"
Nope.
She said.
Didn't have any of those in Minneapolis. At least none I could afford to go to.
"Figured," he said. "Remember when I said those things look like pine cones?"
Yeah?
She said, annoyance coloring her words. "The Arboretum in Dallas? They had some old pine trees that stretched over 100 feet tall within the dome. Magnificent. Green needles, large pine cones dangling off them. If you went in the spring, you came out with yellow pollen clinging to everything."
So, what's your point?
"Do you know what a pine cone is?"
It's a seed pod.
She said.
Again, what is your point?
"Right," he said, ignoring her snark. "I thought those things might be similar. You know, seeds for some other life form."
Well, they sure as hell aren't seeds.
She said.
Never had a seed try and rip through my suit.
"True," he said. "But did you see the way they moved?"
Yes, damn it, I was there.
"We ever get back to S&R Black, I want to show you some hollows of the Dallas Aquarium," he said. "Because I'm pretty sure I saw something move like that."
Really?
Carb asked.
Like what?
"Squid," he said. "I think that's what they're called. Used to live in the ocean. Shit, for all I know, they still do." Carb grunted.
Can't be many of them, unless they went very deep.
"True," he said. "But I think they lived deep. Probably escaped the worst of the radiation. Maybe they managed to thrive. Anyway, point is that those things out there, they might have an analog on old Earth." Carb stopped in mid-step and clumsily turned to face him. With both her feet maglocked to the deck, her helmet pointed directly at him.
Dickerson, you're boring the shit out of me.
He shrugged. "Just an observation," he said.
We don't need to know what they are.
Carb said.
We just need to know how to kill them and stay out of their way.
Dickerson didn't have an answer to that. He wasn't even sure why he was babbling about them, except he couldn't get the image out of his mind of the elongated bodies pulsing in the ZG. Okay, he said. 10 meters.
Right.
She said.
10 meters. Let's hoof it.
He refocused his suit lights, waited for her to get ahead of him, and followed in silence. The box he'd kicked was ahead of them, still tumbling through the ZG. The slip point, a magnetic lift, had no power. That was expected. But with the grav plates inoperable, it didn't matter. All they had to do was walk into the entry point, deactivate their mag boots, and push. The momentum alone would carry them to the very top of the shaft, unless they slowed themselves using their magnetics or suit thrusters. Flying up the slip point to the next deck would be all too easy. During their trip down the corridor, they'd come to a few T intersections. He wanted to travel them, see where they led, and discover what treasures they might contain. Then again, they might very well harbor horrors. He shivered as the memory of the pinecone things once more jumped into his consciousness. Carbonara went first. She stepped into the slip point and thrust herself upward. A moment later, her voice popped through his helmet.
Come on up. Be careful. There's some damage.
Of course there is, he said. He checked his flanks to make sure nothing was creeping up on him and stepped inside the slip point. After taking one more look around him, he deactivated his boots and pistoned his legs. As soon as he was less than a meter off the deck, he knew he'd put too much force into the jump. He was flying upwards through a shaft of darkness. His helmet light did little to illuminate the area, since the materials seemed to eat the light, reflecting nothing back. But what he could see were shapes. Dickerson hit his suit thrusters to slow him down from the suicidal 4 meters per second, but it was a little late for that. The nest of shadows he'd seen on the left side was a tangle of cables that snaked from holes in the shaft walls. He only had a brief glimpse of the damage, but the walls were ragged and falling apart. No wonder his light wasn't reflecting off steel or aluminum. There wasn't any left. He was thankful the remains of the walls weren't floating in here too. Whatever had done this damage, they'd obviously removed it before they lost gravity. Unless something ate it, he thought. Another 5 meters and he saw a corridor egress. He reached out, set the MacLeod to quarter power, and slowed himself until he popped up directly in front of the egress point. Carb's helmet lights chased away the darkness in front of him.
About time,
she said. Right. You could have let me know just how cluttered it was.
I did.
She said in a sweet voice.
You just didn't listen.
He connected to the squad channel. Corporal, over.
Go ahead, over.
Dickerson cast his helmet around the corridor. It was mostly empty except for the odd piece of trash. It was much cleaner than he'd expected. Even the ceiling was intact. We just reached the deck above you. Do you want me to come back and escort you and Elliot? There was a pause.
Dickerson, are you saying I need you to look out for me?
He looked at Carb. She couldn't see the quizzical expression in his eyes, but she giggled into the channel. That's not what I meant, Corporal.
No, I don't need that. What I do need is for you to get to the medical bay and let me know if I should bother bringing him up there.
Ah, Corporal. Out. Dickerson flipped back to private comms. What are you laughing at?
She likes you,
Carbonara said.
If she doesn't kill you first, you two might even end up knocking boots.
Shut up, Dickerson said. He checked his block. Looks like the medical bay is down that hall.
We'll see if they have anti-anxiety meds,
Carb said.
I think you need them.
She finished the sentence through a laugh. Right, he said in response, and began mag-walking in the direction the map showed. This time, he led, and Carb stayed a meter behind and to the left. The same rules applied as on their approach. The corridor walls had the occasional ding, dent, or discoloration, but as they neared the medical bay, the damage was more apparent. Meter-long slashes and the telltale marks of flechette rounds marred the walls, the ceiling, and the floor. Whoa, Dickerson said.
Christ, Dickerson, what the hell happened here?
Carb asked. Look like a firefight to you?
Yeah,
she said.
But that doesn't explain those gouges. Sliced through the walls like beam cutters.
She paused for a moment.
But I've never seen a beam cutter make a metal wound that ragged.
Ragged. That was the word. Those weren't slashes. Those were long, ragged rips and tears through Atmos steel. Nothing, but nothing could do that. Could it? A shadow at the far edge of the light appeared. He held up a fist and knew Carb had instantly stopped. You see what I'm looking at?
Yeah,
Carb said.
it's not putting off heat and it's not radioactive, so we don't have to worry about it being alive or killing us with billions of sieverts.
He shook his head. The pine cones didn't show up on infrared either, Carb,
Oh,
she said.
right.
Silence fell over the comms as they waited. The shadow didn't appear to be moving at all. Considering they were in ZG and Mira had obviously been tossed about, a floating object staying completely stationary was improbable at best. I'm going to take the opposite side of the corridor, he said. Cover me,
Copy.
Carb said, her usual sass absent. Dickerson moved like a drunk, awkward crab to the far wall. Squatting, he crept forward, his helmet lights aimed straight at the shadowy object. With each step he took, the shadow dissolved into a shape. Once he knew what it was, he stopped, his balls shriveling. What the hell? He mumbled.
What is it?
Carb asked. He waved her forward. We're clear. Come on up. Carb stood from her cover position and Mag walked to his side. The light from her helmet added to his. She whistled through the comms.
Someone died hard.
Yeah, Dickerson said. The reason the object wasn't moving was the fact it was attached to the wall by a deck patch harpoon. Someone had fired it more or less point blank and skewered a body straight to the wall. The body had been ripped apart from the waist down, revealing bones and muscle. The rib cage was open and most of the internal organs were missing. But the coup de grace was the head. Tattered shreds of a jumpsuit still partially covered the man's arms and just above his chest. The arms had been removed just above the elbow and the neck was torn open. But the face was the worst. The skin was peeled back from the cheeks, exposing muscle, bone, and the esophageal cavity. The lower jawbone was missing, giving the face a confused expression. The skull had been scalped, but clumsily at best, since strands of hair still clung to the back of the head like a bad toupee. Dried blood clung to the wall in long icicles and ink blot splatters. The deck flooring was covered in dried gore. Dickerson felt like puking, but managed to stifle it. He'd seen worse. He really had. But in this creepy ghost ship, this was just too much.
I'm not even sure I want to know what this was.
Carb said.
Yeah, I'm sure I don't want to know.
Only question I have, Dickerson said, is whether the poor bastard was still alive when they did this to him. He peered at the jumpsuit and made out the label above the pocket. Hope for T. Reed's sake he was already dead.
That his name?
Carb asked. Dickerson nodded. First confirmed casualty since the shuttle bay.
Small favors,
Carb said.
Now I can't wait to see what's waiting for us in the medical bay.